What time is it? It's time for another Every Other Wednesday.
So listen, it's a couple of minutes after 1. Today is, by the way, February the 23rd, 2022, which is what, Sanjay? It is a what day?
It's a palindrome. I love palindromes.
Look at that.
In fact, every day from now to the end of the month will be a palindrome.
But let's be honest, not as palindromic. Is that a word? As yesterday.
No.
Yesterday
it's just a palindromic. It's symmetry, my friend. Okay. By the way, can I just very quickly say that if people don't know, race car is a palindrome. So was Madam I Madam.
Yeah.
Was it a cat I saw? And my personal favorite, Doc Note, I dissent. A fast never prevents a fatness. I died on cod.
Oh wow, that's a great.
Give it up for Sanjay. That's brilliant.
Lion oil.
Practicing all week.
Anniversary.
Hey, we need to. You came to Banff, Rhonda, yesterday, your 26th wedding anniversary.
All right, so we need to get started, and you know what
Stop
that
the tomfoolery.
Yeah,
we need the music, Richard. Cue the music.
What time is it? It's time for another Every Other Wednesday.
Hey, welcome everybody. So as Richard said, it is every other Wednesday. It is Wednesday, coincidentally. It is March, no, it's not March, it's February 23rd, 2022, which means I am wearing a pink shirt because today is official, at least in Canada and some parts of the world, Pink Shirt Day. It is a campaign that started in Canada to raise awareness about bullying. It's an anti-bullying movement. So I'm wearing a pink shirt in honor of that. It is also Curling is Cool Day, International Dog Biscuit Day, Tootsie Roll Day, and Inconvenience Yourself Day, which is actually a day to encourage us all to just be nicer to one another by just inconveniencing yourself just a little bit to be nice to another person. That's the gist behind that theme day. My name is Michael Kerr. I'm coming to you from beautiful Canmore, Alberta in the Canadian Rockies. And with us, as is often the case, to my left is Mr. Richard.
Hi, I'm Richard Haddon, and I'm coming to you from beautiful Jacksonville, Florida. And it is beautiful today, I must say. And I'm an author and speaker, and glad to be here as I am almost every other Wednesday with Michael and
Sanjay Knapp, coming from just outside of Toronto in Oakville, Ontario. I am a professional speaker who focuses on leadership and performance within individuals and organizations. And we are here gathered together on every other Wednesday to talk about our theme today,
which is about time off from work and how time off policy or time off practices, how they might be a reflection of culture. Now, we do have to say the one person who's not with us today, who is often, although not often very much these days, is Jeff Tobe. And he is not taking time off from work. He's
I believe he's on an airplane.
He's on an airplane or in a classroom or something somewhere today. So
he's somewhere. We've called the authorities. We will try to track him down. Thank you, Jenny. I think it's a very nice pink shirt as well. Thank you for that. We're talking about time off, paid time off versus non-paid time off. As Richard said, this is all about culture here. So how that connects to culture, how it reflects culture, how it maybe contributes to a more positive, inspiring culture. And when the three of us got talking about this topic, it's actually a wide-ranging topic with a lot of tentacles, because there's a lot of creative ways organizations are giving their employees paid time off, different options, different creative things that they can do. There are huge, vast differences, as we know, in terms of different policies around the world. So we'll get into a lot of this stuff, but we want to hear from you as always in the chat box. So let's dive in. And of course, this all ties into so much of what we've been talking about in the last couple of years, burnout and resiliency in the workplace as well, right? The role that time off, and especially paid time off, can play in helping us be more resilient and preventing burnout. So let's start, gentlemen and chat attendees, with the big picture.
Can Sanjay and I participate too?
Yeah, but what I just said,
Oh, you said gentlemen, but okay, all right.
Oh, I see. You were being a smart ass.
Debbie, cold 22 minus Fahrenheit right now. Okay.
Oh, that's us in Canmore right now. It's very cold. It was minus 30 yesterday morning. Squirrel. So let's start with the big picture. Why should, and not just any employer, why should society in general care about this notion even of paid time off? Let's start there.
Well, I think it's because we have to have a balance of working and not working if we're going to make the working good and if we're going to make the not working good. And for a long time, we didn't recognize that, or we recognized, but we just kind of didn't look at it. One of my favorite lines from the world of theater and literature is from Scrooge, from Christmas Carol, where Bob Cratchit asks for the next day off, asks for Christmas off, and Scrooge says, well, he's very grumbly, said, okay, you can have the afternoon off on Christmas, but come in all the earlier the next day, and all of that. And, it's like it's a huge, huge big deal. Fortunately, we have progressed a little bit beyond that, but in stages, and different organizations and different cultures have progressed to different degrees, don't you think?
And it's the idea too, though, and we've already kind of tapped on it, is if you're working out, if you work out every day, it's actually bad for you.
Right.
You need the rest time to actually let your muscles recuperate, to actually build upon that. And it's the same thing. If you work every day and you're a machine, you will be a more efficient machine if you are able to take that time off and recuperate mentally, physically, emotionally, socially, all that other stuff. And actually saying this too is, burnout is real. If we spend our time, all our time at work, then we do get burnt out. And not only that, but we see this time and time again, when the whole body experience of the person is not just the worker, but all those different facets come in, you get a more productive person. You get a more productive worker, you get a more satisfied person, and that actually infects the people around them. You were talking about that show, Michael?
Oh, right.
Oh,
yes.
gosh, you got to tell us about that.
Yeah, I'd be curious if anyone has watched this yet. I haven't seen an episode yet. I've just seen the trailer for it and read a few articles about it in business magazines because it raises an interesting point. This new show, it's on Apple TV, I believe, called Severance. And the premise of the show is that you can have a treatment done to your brain so that when you go into work, you have no memory of your personal life. And when you leave your job, you have no memory of your workday. So it is, I guess, touted as the ideal solution to work-life balance, where we're essentially separating our personalities into these two halves. I'm assuming because it's a TV series, it will not work out the way that, folks hoped it would. But it does raise interesting questions, right, around the challenge of work-life balance.
Yeah. And look what Lissa writes. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Lissa, where he says, it comes down to managing the whole person. Work shouldn't be your whole life, even if you love it. I use balance as a verb, not as a noun. Thank you, Lisa, for the correction on the pronunciation.
That's what he said. I heard Lisa the very first time. Listen to the recording.
Yeah. Well, I think it comes down to kind of the organizational mindset, and that could be at the entire organizational level, or sometimes it can be at the departmental level. I mean, the question is, do we trust people to get the work done, or do we feel like we have to control what days and what hours they're working and all of that? And of course, over the last 2 years, we've seen that all bets are off on so much of that.
Right. So it goes back to what I know I've heard you say a lot, Richard, is we have to stop measuring attendance.
Yeah. Are you looking for attendance, or are you looking for
and focus on output and results, right? And so that's part of the discussion too. And I'm glad people are bringing up burnout, because here's what we know from the research too around burnout is it isn't so much the stress or the intensity of the work we're doing in our work hours that contributes to burnout. What they're finding is it is more related to a lack or what we're not doing on our time off, right? So not having enough time off, or not just decompressing properly, not giving ourselves a full break when we are off work to re-energize ourselves, to recharge our batteries.
Yeah.
So here, let me play a bit of devil's advocate, because ideally, I would like to have a personal chef and a personal trainer and a personal chauffeur, and that way I can take care of myself and have all these nice little perks. And I think that a lot of employers would like to give time off and pay time leave and go do what you need and recharge your batteries and stuff. But there's also a economical balance that needs to come into play. So what do you guys hear? Or what are some of the things that you're hearing or seeing out there in the workplace that are allowing people to walk that line?
Yeah, and it's interesting what we have in the chat from Melissa, who says, how do you manage being collaborative if people aren't working at the same time. And it makes me think about kind of where a lot of this got started, maybe not got started, but became more into prominence almost 20 years ago with Netflix. I mean, you guys know what kind of the deal, you know what Netflix's vacation policy is? It's called a no vacation policy. And it really created a big stir. Started in 2003. So, I mean, that's a long time ago. And essentially, Reed Hastings, who's the CEO of Netflix, said, you know, we don't measure what hours of the day people are working. Why should we measure what days of the year they're working? And so they came up with this very controversial no vacation policy. And it just essentially said, get your work done. And when you're not, you know, if you do that, go off. Of course, that created at least two problems. The first, which is pretty obvious, is, and I think it's what Melissa's talking about, stuff didn't get done, you know, because everybody would be gone at the same time and stuff didn't get done. But another thing that happened that was maybe not as obvious was that it began to show up differences in the culture in different departments. And some people felt like they could never take a vacation because there was pressure to always be working. And so what they finally came to the conclusion of was there are three things, and I like the way it's structured. I read an article on this in Inc. magazine where they said, you know, you really, as a leader, you have to set an example. You have to model what that looks like. No, you don't take if you're in the accounting department, you don't take 3 months off in the last 3 months of your fiscal year. You just don't do that. But at the same time, you do take a vacation because people are going to look at that. And if you don't, they will feel like they can't. The other thing is to create context and boundaries and ask people to use their common sense. And the third thing is that above all is communicate.
Yeah, that's great, Richard.
A lot about their culture is, we trust you. Let's help you with some boundaries that'll make it work better for us.
Right. And there's other tech companies that have done that as well, right? Where it's just unlimited. And they too have sometimes found that same challenge where you think the opposite, right? Oh my God, everyone's going to take like 8 months off now. But the opposite happens more often than not, where people don't take any time off because they feel that pressure. They feel guilt taking time off. They feel like they're going to miss out on that promotion because their colleague isn't taking the time off.
There's the other thought too. That's the negative. That's more of the scarcity idea. But there's an abundance idea behind that as well. As people go, oh, I can take off the time whenever I want. I'm in control here. Yeah. And so if you're going to be able to create that, when people get to go to work rather than have to go to work, there's a fundamental shift in the culture. And this is the problem, or one of the issues is we constantly try to figure out this one universal solution. But the reality is Richard is a productive worker, and he's got with self-actualization, and he's got internal focus, internal locus of control, and use all these fancy business terms. Whereas on the flip side, Michael is do the minimum, try to cheat the system, try to get away with as much as possible. And what we try to do is we try to have a policy that unifies everyone, and you can't do it. You don't want to piss off the Richards of the world to try to control the Michaels. You're better off giving them, the autonomy to do what they want, and then on a one-on-ones, you deal with the Michaels and you smack them on the wrist, going, look, here's what's acceptable. And if we're going to make boundaries, we have to make the boundaries for him, not for the entire organization. Yeah, and there's all kinds of stuff in the chat.
Read us some of that, Sanjay.
So I said, if COVID would go away, we could actually go out and enjoy activities, friends, and that'll help with the decompressing. Absolutely. Remote working is shifting our perceptions and progress and productivity in some fields, 100%. Sure. And even the fields that it doesn't directly affect, peripherally, I think people are having to do things because now what they're doing affects the people that are directly affected. Yeah. Celeste Headley has this great book called Do Nothing that discusses burnout and her concept of purposeful rest, doing something that has no productive purpose. I think that if it's purposeful rest, it would have a productive purpose, but that's just me. So many old school leaders cannot break the idea of if they can't see it, then they're not working, which is very true. You guys want to comment on that?
Oh, it's true. And that's got to go away. And the pandemic has certainly, I think, moved us in that direction.
Well, and I've said this before, even before the pandemic, Did you know what your employees were doing every second of the day? Of course not.
Yeah, the question is, how do we know if they're working? Well, how did you know before? Yeah,
it's about trust.
Now, folks, what about we've been talking with a little bit of an assumption of people who are doing head work or as opposed to hand work in a factory, for instance, in a production facility. You can't just have everybody taking time off and vacation and so forth, because you have to get, it has to be done. It has to be done in a particular location. So there's vacation. Well, let's talk for a little bit about other kinds of time off, like, for instance, sick leave. Okay. Now, again, I live in one country.
Richard, I'm going to jump in before we go to the sick leave. Let me go through more of these comments.
Okay. All right, great. Then we'll talk about being sick.
Yeah, we have more work than there is to get done. So many people never take time off. Very true. I think we also need to look at the hierarchy of company. Oftentimes, it's the top brass who have little to no personal life, and so they dictate time to their work, which turn, I can't read today, which in turn makes everyone below
is a professional communicator, by the way.
There you go. Me speak good, and spend all of their time working. Okay, I have seen that employees of the companies that have unlimited vacation are the ones that get the least vacation days, which is a comment we were making earlier. And it could be because they feel comfortable and they can do it whenever they want, or they feel scared that they have to keep up with the Joneses because everyone else is going to get the promotion if they're not there.
Yeah.
Even when organized encourages employees to take leave time, there is an overwhelming feeling by many that being away from work just creates more upon your return. So we need to manage that as well. They say the ideal time for a vacation is long enough for people to recognize, long enough for people to miss you, but not so long that they recognize they can get along without you. So there's
and what is that number exactly?
Exactly.
We have that down to a science. Like,
it depends on the person. For some people, it's hours. For some people, it's days.
Is it? Yes. That's why we have to be the kind of person that people are happy to see come back from vacation, as opposed to seeing them leave for vacation. And I want to circle around to one of the comments in the chat box and something Richard said earlier too, before we ship this. And again, that the importance of leaders role modeling this, even on a daily level. I know of one CEO who sends the message all the time to all of his senior leadership team: I want you out the door when your workday ends. If your workday ends at 4:30, you better be out of here at 4:30, because if you stay longer, your employees are going to stay longer. And that is not one of our cultural values here. One of our primary values is health and wellness of our employees, and we have to live that out loud. So go home and tell people you're going home. And in the remote world, doing this as well, where senior leaders are actually sending out messages sometimes saying, I am now logging off for the weekend. I'm not going to read emails or texts, and I expect you to do the same. Enjoy your weekend. So when we can do those kind of things, we need to model that and communicate it out loud.
Yeah.
I see a comment there from Anna Wildman, who says, it's definitely tough as the manager to know what people results should be achieving. Weekly check-ins of just 10 minutes is a great way to keep track. How did last week go? What are you working on this week? What help do you need? That, by the way, is the very same Anna Wildman who has written this book, Now You're Talking, by Anna Wildman. It's a wonderful book, and I highly recommend it. You should all get out there and look at it. And I am so delighted that Anna is with us today.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Anna's great. Anna knows a lot about just managers and leaders talking with their employees and finding things out so they can help and be better leaders. So
question here.
Yeah.
From Margarita, it says, if there is a position that can be measured by results, why not, right? Dictate the outcome, not the process. But when you have strict environment tied to your schedule, like a call center, you cannot do that. Or how can you do it?
Okay, I just responded to a request in the chat. Very good. So can we take a vacation from vacation now and talk about some of the other kinds of
Sanjay maybe wanted an answer to that question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Center, yeah. Well, there are situations, of course, where people physically have to. And I used to be a manager in a department where this was very much the case, where some people could work from any place, anytime, but other people, because of their roles, had to be at a front desk, for example, from these hours, because that's when the visitor center was open. So there's no way around it. So, of course, in some degree, you're still measuring time there. But in terms of results, it's still a matter of I think, defining and articulating those results very clearly from what you want, whether they're call center employees or front desk customer service employees. You still want to be focused on results and not just a zombie showing up for 8 hours and saying, you know, check, they did their 8 hours, we're all good.
Yeah, exactly what you're saying, Mike. There are certain things, retail and healthcare, and there's a lot of industries that they are time bound. But within the constraints of the time bound, you can still have the output or dictate the outcome being, I want people when they're leaving to smile. So, you know, that's the result I'm looking for. I'm not telling you how to do that. You can wear a clown nose, or you can juggle, or you can smile, or you can hold the door open. I don't care. Whatever suits your personality the best, we want you to bring that and bring that to work. And so we're trying to create an environment that allows you to do that, keeping in mind here is the big picture.
Right. Okay. Modesty and humility prevents me from reading the article from Rob Morris, reading the chat from Rob Morris, but he makes a good point, talking about discretionary effort. You see what it says there, Sanjay?
I know, because I am still at 117 with Shelby. The chat is blowing up. I am 22 messages behind.
Okay.
So this is a great problem to have. So I'm gonna let you. This is what we're gonna do is, because of time, and we want to get onto this. Yeah. What you were talking about. So we're going to encourage people to go look at the chat. I'm going to skim through it and maybe bring up 1 or 2 points, but we're going to keep moving forward. Okay. Take it away.
Well, Rob mentions the whole issue of discretionary effort, which we've talked about here before. And we were talking about this, remember, right before we got on today, about, this is discretionary effort in terms of the employer. So discretionary effort is the idea that doing more than you have to do. Well, so let's talk about what employers have to do versus what employers can do, you know? So, and here's the interesting dynamic. I live in one country, my 2 colleagues live in another country. The US and Canada view this kind of thing, from a legal standpoint in very different ways. So in the United States, for instance, there is no guarantee of sick time off. You don't get paid for sick time. I think there is that in Canada. Is that correct? And I mean, there are all kinds of different policies, and different states in the US see it a different way. But overall, we can say that there is no guarantee of paid sick time and paid parental leave time in this country, but there are in many other countries. So, but obviously, a large number of people in the United States do get paid for sick time. They do get paid for parental leave, but that is at the discretion of their employer, not because they're forced to do that. Now, let's think for a minute about sick time. And to me, it's always seemed crazy that any employer would encourage people to come to work when they're sick. And that's exactly what you do when you're not paying people sick time. Obviously, you can't. There have to be limits to it. And you have to understand the needs of the organization, the needs of the person. And that's why we do have disability insurance and things like that. But essentially, when we say, nope, you don't get paid unless you come to work, that encourages people to bring COVID to the office and anything else they might happen to have, coming out of their lungs to the office. And it's just not good policy. What do you think?
Oh, totally agree. It's in fact, I would use the phrase reckless policy. Reckless policy. I mean, why would you want sick people showing up at work and encouraging that, whether you know it or not, and infecting other employees? So now you have more employees sick. You're putting a strain on your healthcare system in your communities. There's all sorts of downstream factors.
So again, let me play devil's advocate and say, okay, say you run the DMV or the MTO or the pick your province. You run that vehicle thingy and all your people are sick. And the idea is, okay, well, you either bring in the people that are sniffling or you close the doors and everyone else who is going to renew their license is super pissed. What do you do? Right. And again, it's not, it's nice if everyone's healthy, then everything's working fine. But the problem is the wheels fall off the bus way too often. And they fall off the bus because of natural occurring things. And they fall off the bus because people are trying to cheat the system. And they fall off the bus because there's bad luck. Yeah. And the question is, it's not that you aren't going to have people to cheat the system, because you always will. It's not that you're not going to have bad luck, because you always will. It's not going to, you can't avoid the natural disasters. So when you do have all that, then what do you do?
Well, you mentioned everybody we call it the DMV. when we're being kind, being out sick. But suppose you have one or two who are out and they say, well, I don't know if this is the case, probably in state government, it's not the case. But suppose you say, well, you can't come to work. I'm not going to come to work. I'm not going to get paid. So I'm going to come to work and infect everybody else. If you do have one or two, a reasonable number, stay home, get well, come back, and we're not going to penalize you for it. But then that takes us to the whole issue of, and I think it's a fascinating issue, and that is parental leave, family leave. And it's not just for maternity leave or this whole relatively new concept of paternity leave, but other kinds of family leave, elder care, spousal care, partner care, child care, all of those.
Richard, pet bereavement care.
Pet bereavement care. That's right. Yeah, I mean,
pet bereavement.
It covers the whole waterfront. So again, I'm in the U.S. You're in Canada. There are other countries that are represented on our call here today. Here's something that's a little bit that might be a little bit shocking to some, or perhaps not. Let me see if I can just pull this up where I need it.
Do I need to get my Home Alone face ready? Am I going to be that shocked?
No, I don't think so. But here's what we have going on with the.
Richard.
Yeah, I'm going to spotlight this for just a minute. Yeah, so this is everyone. This is the United States and a whole bunch of other countries.
There we go.
And weeks of parental paid leave. Look at that. Estonia, 82 weeks by law. Sweden, 68. Japan, 52. We have a number of people from the UK and at least one UK national in the US that I know is on the call today. 39 weeks. And look where the US is in all of this. Great big goose egg there. So
and it's I believe 40 weeks for Canada, so we're kind of close
40
to the
weeks.
UK
So you're kind of in there as well. Yeah. So, and it's interesting. Some of you know my daughter lives in the UK. She moved to Scotland about 2 years ago. One of the reasons, not the driving reason, but one of the reasons was so that if she has a child, she'll have a little bit more time off from work being paid than she might have if she stayed here in the US. So
right.
I think on a global scale, we compete against that with other societies.
And interesting cultural differences between countries, right? I mean, I think most of us probably know that the Scandinavian countries are known for very progressive laws when it comes to things like this, paternity leave, vacation leave. I mean, you start a job in some countries in Europe and you get 6 weeks off right away. So it makes a big difference depending on where you live. But then you look at the research and you look at the happiness levels, for example, of citizens and the happiness levels of employees. And there's kind of a positive correlation. Some of the most inspiring workplaces are in Scandinavian countries. I've spent time in places like Estonia, Sweden, Finland, Norway, Denmark, researching companies there because they're known for their incredibly inspiring humane cultures that focus on families and the well-being of their employees. And so you see that paid off. So there's kind of a cultural approach at a countrywide level. And we see that even, I was talking earlier about the difference here in Canada, where with paternal leave, I was just reading that 84% of Quebec dads exercise their rights to take paternal leave, versus the rest of Canadian dads, only 11% do. So there's a huge cultural difference there, even within Canada, right?
Yeah.
So not only is there a cultural difference depending on the company, but a cultural difference, of course, depending on where people live.
So my question is this: do you think that legislation is the answer, or is it like, for example, if you take some of these Scandinavian companies, I don't actually have no idea what the laws are there, if they're required or whatever, but if you remove that law, do you think that people would still behave the same? Because I think they would, because I think it's ingrained in the family values or the culture of the country, and that's just the way it is. And I think often what happens when you legislate things, and in fact, economics, my first economics course, it blew my mind when they said by having a minimum wage, it actually slows down the economy, right? And this is the same idea as when you legislate and you force people to abide by the rules, what they do is they circumvent the rules and they try to cheat the rules and they try to come around it. But if we educate people on and someone made the idea in the chat box that, there's a corporate social responsibility to start taking care of those little humans for the future. I think that has a much more sustainable approach, and it's much harder to break. And read a couple comments here. It says only 11% of U.S. workers currently belong to a labor union. That actually blows my mind. I figured it was much higher. By comparison, over 70% of Danes belong to the union. Denmark has tremendous employee benefits and generous leave policies.
That's interesting. Well, if we talk about an ideal, and of course, I wrote a book called Contented Cows Give Better Milk, that makes the whole point that, if satisfied employees are going to be naturally more productive. So, but I recognize that that is an ideal. Ideally, if every organization, did exactly the right thing, then we wouldn't have to have any legislation. But I also recognize that some organizations cannot be counted on to do that. And that's why we have legislation. It's why we have unions in some cases. But it kind of goes back to that whole idea of, what do you have to do, and what do you do because you want to do it? I heard a comment years ago on National Public Radio where someone said, the law is hardly a lofty standard. And I love that line. It's true. If we shouldn't, as an organization, if I want to compete for the best talent, if I want to have the most productive employees, if I want to make the most money through a really fired up, focused, and engaged workforce, I'm going to take care of my workforce, whether anybody tells me I have to or not. But then there are other organizations that don't look at it that way, and that's why we have laws.
Right. And that applies to other issues as well. You think of safety regulations, right?
Yeah.
There are government standards that are put in place, but often companies will exceed those, sometimes by quite a bit, because they'll say, well, that's the bare minimum we have to do, but let's do better than that.
And that ties into the chat. And what they're saying in the chat says, how are companies with such generous family leave? Oh, now it just stop putting in comments. You're making it scroll. Sorry. How are
you
families
can unscroll it
with such generous family leaves able to afford to pay people who aren't at work? They must bring in someone to fill in the spot. So aren't they paying double? And then Jeannie replies with, I believe that family leave is paid through EI. EI in Canada is employment insurance. And at which point Carol says, what is EI? Is it a Canadian term? Yes, it is. And so, but even with EI, employment insurance, what they do is they give you a minimum, and often organizations within Canada will choose to top it up. Yes. So if EI is paying half your normal salary, they might pay another 25%. So you're getting 3/4 of your normal salary, or nothing, or the full 50%. So you're getting a full 100%.
So Sanjay, that's where they're exercising discretionary effort on the part of the organization, right? They are choosing to compete favorably against their competitors for talent by doing more than they are legally required.
Exactly. Hey, and we haven't touched on some other creative ways.
Let's talk about those. Yeah.
Some progressive companies are giving paid time off. Things like, I know of several companies that give paid time off an X number of days per year for employees that want to do charity work or volunteer work within their community, which I think is a very cool community-minded approach. A lot of companies do, well, not a lot, but some progressive companies have sabbatical programs in place where you are allowed to take, say, 3 months off every 5 years to get a longer kind of refreshing break, or even some companies where I know of one where it's every 7 years, you are required to take a full year off from your work to come back. And this is a creative company of some kind, but they do that to give people a totally different perspective, a total recharge, so they come back with a very fresh perspective.
A lot of universities require that, where every seventh year you have to go and travel and teach somewhere else, and that idea. And the other thing it brings is that perspective, like from the university standpoint. If you go to the university in South America and then you learn some of their best practices and you see how things are done, it actually, in theory, is supposed to make you a better educator when you come back. And that's kind of the point we're trying to make, is by giving people downtime, it actually makes them more productive in their uptime.
Yeah. So don't you, gentlemen, don't you think we're kind of talking about the same here? It's the same thing here, whether we're talking about vacation leave, sick leave, bereavement leave, paternity leave, sabbatical, all of that stuff. we're really talking about the same umbrella here, the same basket. We're talking about treating employees like humans first, recognizing they are functioning human beings with families and with personal needs, and not just robots. And this is a reflection of our culture, and thinking about all of these different options. We want to reflect the culture we want to be, but we also want to use these policies to build our desired culture. Is that fair?
That is very fair.
And Michael, you must be a professional communicator, because you just summed that up in about 123 words. Very, very accurate.
It felt longer.
Well,
it seemed longer too. Just listening to you talk, it's just.
I know some people probably nodded off. At one point.
What about the whole idea of whether we have a policy or not about just individual discretion that different managers might have, to say, hey, I know you're having a rough time. What can we do?
Before we jump into there, I want to say the other thing is, we've all had this where we've gone to work for a week and we're like, oh, I got nothing done this week. And you literally got nothing done because it was this call and that lunch went over, and your headspace, every time you went to sit down, your mind was mush. And on the flip side, we've all had that experience where we woke up at 2 a.m. because we couldn't sleep. We sat down on the computer and we did more work in 2 hours than we've done in the last 2 weeks together.
Yeah.
And so the idea of having someone work from 9 to 5 and putting in their 8 hours, just because they're physical 8 hours doesn't mean that they're productive 8 hours. Yeah. And sometimes by making the relationship deposits or the cultural deposits within the organization to get people in the frame of mind that they're so bloody efficient that even if they're only working for 4 hours a day, it's what they were doing before in a week. And so you've actually increased the productivity by 5-fold because they're doing 4 hours a day for 5 days a week rather than doing what they were doing before. So there is other added benefits when we trade time for money and kind of assume that your hour is the same as my hour, is the same as his hour, is the same as her hour. I think we can fall into a fallacy. We just got to really be careful. And if we can create those environments and those culture, this is what we've been doing. That's what we talk about every other Wednesday. When we can create the environment where, again, I said it earlier, when people get to go to work, they don't have to go to work. They are more productive. And in the end, it allows the employer to reap the profits to do things like implement these programs like paid leave, like extended parental leave, like paid vacation, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
All right. I'm off my soapbox now.
We have a comment in the chat from Shelby, who says, I feel like this should be a 2-part EOW with this being such a hot topic. So I'm
a mini series.
So I'm going to issue a challenge to Shelby and others. And that is, I'm going to put my email in the chat. What would you like us to cover specifically if we were to do another, and I send it to I did exactly what I'm not supposed to do. And I didn't send it to everybody. Let me just send it to everyone. What exactly would you have us cover if we were to do another episode around this topic of time?
And to Shelby's point, like the chat has been blowing up. Like normally people are interactive and whatever, but we actually can't keep up with it, which is fantastic. I know there were some really good comments that have been made. So I really do encourage people to download the chat.
Gentlemen, do you think this topic, I'm calling you gentlemen a lot today. I'm being so kind.
No.
I know it's unusual.
It's because Jeff's not here and therefore.
That's right. That's why.
In contrast.
That's why. Do you think I can't go more than a day without reading an article about the 4-day work week and about how so many companies are exploring this or moving to a 4-day work week, and they're finding, back to Sanjay's point, people are getting just as much, if not more, done during those 4 days than they used to working 5 days. And even though well, in some ways it's talking about paid time off because it's giving people more time off, right? I mean, that's obviously why a lot of companies want to move that, and why a lot of employees love it, is permanent 3-day weekends, right? Do you think that's part of this conversation?
I think so, but in those 4 days, are you referring to a 4-day work week with 10-hour days or with 8-hour days, Michael?
Well, it varies depending on what companies approach.
It's kind of hard to argue against a 4 day work week with 10-hour days from the number of hours worked kind of standpoint, and yet there are arguments against it. But yeah, I think so. So folks, if you would, I'd love to explore this some more, but send us an email.
I know a lot of police officers in my area. They do 4 days on and then 3 days off, but they do 12-hour shifts. So they do 48 hours. Yeah. And then 4 days on, 4 days off. So they do 48 hours every 8 days. Yeah. And that's what they do. But I also think though, whether it's 10 hours times 4 or 8 hours times 5, I don't think it matters. I think from an organizational standpoint, you have to articulate and go, this is the sandbox and these are the rules of our sandbox. Yeah. And if you like that, welcome, come on in. And if you don't, the guys down the street are doing it differently.
They have a different sandbox. And that is how organizations can compete. A very popular, very common model in the healthcare world, certainly in the United States, is for nurses and other people who are working at the bedside in hospitals is 3 13-hour days. My sister did that for decades and loved it. Had 3 days on. She was tired at the end of every one of those days, but she had 4 days off. So
there's so many different models.
Chris, I have to ask, Chris just wrote, a school district in our state just approved a 4-day work week, a 4-day school week. I would love to hear what district, where are you?
Tell us where that is, Krista, because we want to
Iowa.
In Iowa. Okay.
Don't tell my kids because they will move to Iowa.
Okay.
Just saying.
Listen, we got to start wrapping up here.
We do. There's only a minute left.
This has been more fun. I mean, I look forward to this every time. This is so much fun, but this has been even more fun than usual. And we didn't even have a special guest host this time, which
was it more fun than usual because Jeff wasn't here? Is that what you're saying?
Not say that. He's going to watch this.
When Jeff eventually comes back, he'll be our special guest host.
There you go. Hey, listen, one thing we do have to say before we go is you can bring the 4 of us, including our phantom Jeff Tobe, into your organization virtually, probably at this point, maybe at some point in person, and have EOW on site. So contact us if that's something that you'd be interested in. Folks, what do we want to say about next time? Because we'll be back in 2 weeks, and that is, I have to look at my calendar. What is that? That makes it
March 9th.
It is March 9th.
March the 9th.
And weirdly enough, it falls on a Wednesday.
Yeah.
Hold on, sorry. Just because it's a March 9th, I have to say it. I don't even know why it's reminding me of this, but why did the Frenchman have only 1 egg? Because 1 egg was enough.
Enough. Okay. All right.
How did that make you think of that joke?
March 9th? No, I don't know.
Lord.
Folks, we're coming in on less than 30 seconds here. What else do we need to say before we go? We're definitely going to have another session on this. We want to give us some ideas and we'll definitely fill out the program. What else do you say, gentlemen?
Well, I want to thank my esteemed colleagues here for their input as always, the gentleman sitting next to me far away. And for all of you who joined us today, for all of your incredible comments in the chat box. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. We value you.
I would like to say this, sort of my last thought is, it sounds like there was a consensus that people believed in paid time off. And we're going to be off between now and every other Wednesday. So feel free to pay us.
There you go.
That would be awesome.
All right, folks. It's always so much fun. Thank you so much. And we'll see you every other Wednesday.
Bye, all.
Thanks, folks. Cheers.
Be safe.
Be well.